It's 6 o'clock. I'll declare the meeting open. Welcome you all to the June meeting of the Fremantle Council Planning Committee. Gala kadich wajuk mort kayen kadak nija walyala buja, where jinang wajuk katijin where nying bula yeye. We acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the greater Fremantle Walyup area and recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. Just introduce the committee. I'm Councillor Jones, presiding member. From the left, Councillor Sullivan, Lorver, Archibald, Lang and Graham. The Mayor is an apology, and we have officers assisting the committee, whose names you can see. The proceedings are live streamed and recorded. The people seeing the recording can hear your voice, but they can't see your face, basically. I'll just go through a few formalities and then we'll get down to business. So I've got an apology from Councillor Groom, who's deputised by Councillor Archibald, and an apology from Mayor Fitzharding. Any disclosures of interest by members? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I'm disclosing an interest in item 7, Juro Road. The architect for the applicant is a unit holder in Donnelly River Village, which I'm also a unit holder in, and therefore it's a financial interest. I'll leave the room.
You leave the room. Thank you. Responses to previous questions. Sorry, there are no more disclosure of interest. Okay. Responses to previous questions taken on notice. I don't believe there are any. Public question time is for questions about items that are not on tonight's agenda. Is there anybody in that category? Okay, any petitions, deputations, presentations. So we'll confirm the minutes of the Planning Committee of the 3rd of May 2023. I'll move the minutes. As a seconder, Councillor Graham. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Now, just to reiterate, you can either wait and speak when your item comes up. There are 10 items, or you can speak now on any item. We'll take them in order, and then if you wish to leave, you can do so. So is everybody clear about that? So I'll go through each item one by one. If you just put your hand up if you'd like to speak now. Can you keep track of who's spoken then? Okay, so okay, so item 1 is 29 Swanbourne Street. Anybody like to speak now? You're first anyway. Item 2, Amherst Street, multiple unit development. Item 3, Blinko Street, multi-unit development. Item 4, Freeman Loop, variation to conditions of bar licence. Cliff Street, change of use to residential. Yeah, Mr. Fittock, yes, we'd like to. So when you speak, you have 3 minutes. You'll hear a small alarm just before your 3 minutes is up. We'd ask you to draw to a close. Can you come out to the microphone, please, for the recording? Sorry. Item 5, 6 Cliff Street.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm only here to answer any questions or any clarification. So I'll keep mine very, very short. So if there's any questions that the councillors would like to ask, please feel free.
Are there any questions of the applicant's representative? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6, Queen Victoria Street, additions, alterations, change of use to office, shops and cafe. Anybody like? Yes, would like to come forward, introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, councillors. My name's Hamish Fleming. I own a few businesses in North Fremantle, and I was here a few years ago banging on about car parking in North Fremantle. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to come and talk about it again. I'm not either in favour or against this proposal. I really just want a little bit more thought going into it. it seems to me that it's going to have once again a very large effect on car parking. We know that North Fremantle has had challenges with car parking for quite some time. There's currently 8 hospitality businesses in North Fremantle, and all of them rely on the one privately owned car park. And this is the car park that was referred to in the planning officer's report. So obviously we've got a large shortfall there, but I just wanted to point out that that there are 8 other businesses all using that car park, and obviously it's quite it's unfair for businessmen like me and other businesses to say you can't use that car park because it's owned by the landlords for that strip. But I just want to take this opportunity for council to maybe come up with some kind of strategy plan for North Fremantle, which I'd be happy to be involved with for specifically infrastructure. A lot of thought has gone into Fremantle in recent years, and we've reaped the benefits of a fantastic rejuvenation of Fremantle. North Fremantle, of course, is the gateway to Fremantle, and I do feel like it's been forgotten in recent years. What we're talking about with this application is another 4 hospitality venues going into a very small village. There is, of course, a vacant block on the corner of Harvest Road and Stirling Highway that's been sitting there for 40 years. And last time there was an application here, I did work with the previous Mayor, Brad Pettit, on trying to get those owners across the line to free that up for car parking. And perhaps this is a good opportunity to re-engage with that piece of land and those owners. So my suggestion today is not for or against, but to defer decision on this item with a little bit more thought gone into how we solve those problems going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Anyone else on item 6, Queen Victoria Street? Yes. Let's introduce yourself, please.
So hi, my name is Sonia, and I'm here to represent my husband. That's why I bring my children, sorry. So we live in 23 Jewel Parade in North Fremantle, and I'm just going to read the notes that he left for me. Of course, it's the same thing that I think. So he says, I note that several cafes, restaurants, 5 as shown in page 2 of the planning document, are being proposed. My opinion is that the area is quite saturated with cafes, restaurants, and bars. The addition of such a large number of cafes, restaurants would not quite benefit the area. In fact, could be detrimental for excessive competition with existing businesses. The addition of more diverse services and businesses such as grocery stores, convenience stores, bookshop would, on the opposite side, greatly benefit the North Fremantle area community, creating a much-needed town centre feeling. One very important point to note is the noise impact. I'm concerned about the noise impact from the proposed alfresco area. The noise assessment report shows that in order to comply with current regulations, 1, only background style music is permitted, 2, only music with minimal bass content shall be selected, and 3, music is set to below 65 dB. And our concern as living right in front of this venue is who and how will be this monitored, because currently we are having issues with 2 other owners of Mojo's and Miss Brown, and the noise complaints are regular, and we are always trying to communicate. Often the police is involved in this, and eventually the noise is turned down, but this is an ongoing situation for us. And so I would like the council to consider this.
Thank you. First, I could ask the manager to explain how noise complaints are dealt with. They're not dealt with at the development application stage. They're dealt with by the council's compliance officers. But perhaps you can, so at least you'll know who to talk to next time.
Through you, Chair. Mic's on. Sorry, I'll speak up. When you do have a noise complaint, our environmental health officers can come and monitor noise. Obviously, if it is an immediate antisocial issue, the police do look into it. If there are breaches of the environmental noise regulations, they are dealt with through that separate legislation, not the planning legislation. And in this instance, the applicant has provided a report that demonstrates they are capable of complying with the noise regulations. If there are issues down the track, of course, like existing venues, they will be made to comply with those requirements.
Are there any other speakers on item 6, Queen Victoria Street? Okay, number 9, Duo Road, single house. Yes. Yep, would you like to come forward? And you don't want to speak now? No. Okay. Walker Street, number 31. Yep. Try to. Yep. Walker Street. Yep. Right, come forward, please.
Good evening. I'm just speaking on behalf of the officer's recommendation for approval and supporting their recommendation. This alteration and addition is really quite minor. It's front garden with a fireplace, a carport, and a veranda, barbecue. And the barbecue is a Croatian sort of inspired barbecue, and this house was built in 1952 by Croatian boat builders that came from Corcula with their kids, and for the next 2 generations, crayfishing activities and maintaining craypots and boats have happened in this house. The proposal is for the Croatian barbecue terrace, whitewashed masonry fences and sidewalls and vines and pergolas. Walker Street is a social, community-minded street. The proposed barbecue, terrace and front fence are designed to balance this community building, chatting and casual sharing of experience with passing neighbours, with the slightly private space to feed and catch up with family friends out the front while providing passive surveillance of the street. Much better sight lines for the footpath going around this blind corner on the end of the street are then also provided by the curved wall. The chimney is in keeping with the general massing of the street and its trees in adjacent front yards. It's a tree-like sculpture. It's chimney enhancing the heritage streetscape. And it's just an occasional cooking barbecue. Occasionally cooking and entertaining with friends and family in the front yard is healthy and community building. People have been cooking with fire for 780,000 years. And the chimney height will control the smoke, which is why we've pushed it up a little bit higher than if it was a little bit lower, it would have been a structure which was not needing any planning at all, just a barbecue. The carport is in keeping with the scale and massing of the streetscape. It enhances the character, amenity and the architecture and has no adverse effect. It will just make a wonderful uplifting addition at the end of the street and be non-detrimental at all. The cultural and historical significance of this house is primarily that of, like I said, crayfishing family. The chimney is completely in keeping with the cultural heritage story and cooking culture, and it's in keeping with the scale and massing of the streetscape. As the last house on the street, it is consistent with the trees and the end of the street. It doesn't stick out. It creates a beautiful sculptural-like point of focus at the end of the vista called Walker Street. It's just an unusual minor structure. And that's pretty much it. Is there any questions?
Any questions of the architect? No, thank you very much. Anyone else to speak on Walker Street? Yep. Should I come forward, please? Thank you. Could you get your name, please?
Jan Davidson.
Davidson.
Look, sadly, I want to speak against the recommendation for conditional approval of the alterations and additions to 31 Walker Street. But specifically with respect to what the architect was just talking about, the new front fencing with the outdoor oven and chimney incorporated in it, I feel that the assessment under LPP 3.6 doesn't provide sufficient information on how the proposal responds to each of the accessible elements, and the decision appears to rely on two factors. First of all, the hit and miss brickwork and built-in barbecue on the streetscape, being a loose interpretation of traditional interwar and post-war fencing in the area. That's a quote. I think this is questionable, as the 33 houses in Walker Street, the predominant form of fencing is low-level fences of pickets or masonry construction, or no fences at all. There's no evidence of built-in barbecues or cooking facilities of this size and scale contained within primary streetscape in Walker Street or in the area in general. The second factor is the reliance on the location of the dwelling at the end of the street to alleviate its impact on the prevailing streetscape, specifically stating that the outdoor oven and chimney are deemed to have minimal impact on the streetscape of Walker Street because of the subject site's location at the end of Walker Street, meaning it is concealed and will not have an adverse amenity impact on surrounding landowners and occupiers. This approach to assessing the proposal is questionable again because it suggests concealment of the outdoor oven and chimney is desirable rather than demonstrating how it respects and harmonises with the predominant form of the prevailing landscape. Further, to suggest that landowners and occupiers at the end of the street will not experience adverse impact on their amenity because of their location is flawed. The size and bulk of the proposed outdoor oven and its 4.7 metre chimney will have an adverse visual impact in addition to smoke, cooking smells, noise, traffic and the like for people at the end of the street. The notion that the proposed outdoor oven and chimney is more acceptable because it's out of sight at the end of the street ignores the amenity of residents in the area and takes the focus away from the provision of information to demonstrate it meets the requirements of LPP 3.6. Walker Street's a thoroughfare to South Beach, and it's a vibrant area with a lot of passing traffic, particularly pedestrian, scooters and bicycle traffic. Property is not concealed and has high visibility from the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? So there's no further speakers on the Walker Street. Okay, the item 10, the precinct structure plan for 140 Sterling Highway. A few people registered to speak on that. Would you like to speak on that? Can we get your name, please?
Anne Tuvey. I bought into Tasker's 18 months ago, and I was assured that the building on the site where One Steel is was a heritage classified building and that nothing would be allowed to be built up higher than that level, which of course there's now the proposal for the apartments, another apartment block. I was very grateful to see that Fremantle Council was saying no to that, and I just wonder what's going to happen. I'm also very concerned about the traffic and the numbers of people. I communicated with Kevin Rowe and he came out and did a plan as to how to do it because it's just like an accident waiting to happen in that area, and just the sheer numbers and the size of McCabe Street is a real worry. And I think my friend Joy would like to say something about the numbers also. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get your name, please?
Yes, my name
Yep.
is Joy North and I live in McCabe Street at the Tasker development. My concern is there is a severe dogleg in McCabe Street, which I think I went to a last meeting about this development some months ago, and I was told that the main roads are not going to take that dogleg out. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's also 2 car parks immediately in front of Building 9 on McCabe Street, which is apartments, and they are cafe or delivery vans that park there, which really occludes your vision as you come out of McCabe Street, out of our area, which is down to number 2 Tasker Place. The other thing is the the traffic is severe at the moment, even because there are two schools. There's St Hilda's Junior School up further in, it might be Alston Street, I think, and there's also Iona and PLC and St Hilda's in the area. And I think more traffic would be an absolute disaster in that area. So I don't know how high the building's going to be. I was told at that previous meeting that 11 stories was the limit in Fremantle, but I doubt that that'll be kept to knowing what the development situation is in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on item 10? Yeah, sorry, can you give us your name, please?
Thank you. My name's Tony Blackwell. I'm a landscape architect. I'm just here to commend the council officers who prepared the report that you've presumably all read, that discusses very broadly all the issues that this proposed development raises. And from my own perspective, I think that the fact that it's identified as really constituting a new activity centre, which isn't on the WAPC's radar, and gives you an idea of the size and implication that this development would have, and the ongoing, all the other kick-on effects it might have with regard to schooling services and the like. I think also the nature, size, bulk, mass of the development runs totally contrary to the current planning framework in the area, and that I know went through quite a rigorous community consultation process, so that it's completely at odds with that. The other thing with this particular site, I mean, the sort of heights that are involved, if you think about the observation city development, how long that, in fact, it still remains an eyesore on our skyline, very visible along the coast for many, many kilometres. This development, as proposed, is even more significant than that. And once again, it's unprecedented for this sort of stretch of coastline in Western Australia. I think also the traffic concerns that have been raised, I'll go even a step further. If you consider the number of people that will be living in this development, trying to do a right-hand turn out of there during rush hour in the morning, there's absolutely no way they're going to find a break in the traffic to get out. That would, just by nature, as a traffic solution, require a roundabout, and that roundabout would either have to be shared on the land of 130 and 140 Stirling Highway, or alternatively, a significant amount of roadworks would have to be undertaken to divert the traffic onto the 140 property, which has got obviously major implications with regard to the community and disruption to traffic flow. I think that the level of traffic that's expected to be occurring on McCabe Street's already predicted to, that the lights are predicted to what's called fail, even under the current circumstances. And bearing in mind we've got the Rocky Bay Village site likely to be hitting or getting some sort of traction in the not so distant future. We've already got the Wellington Street shops and a good number of more people that will be travelling down McCabe Street. And finally, I think the considerations about pedestrians wanting to, who bought into this prime location, right next to the ocean, but wanting to cross over the Stirling Highway, which is obviously a very major traffic conduit, has not been given any real consideration. I know there's some discussion about an overhead walkway, but really if that was to proceed, it would have to be considered in the context of the development on the land which is actually within government ownership, where the current landscape contractors or the sales site is. So in all, I think there's a great number of reasons why this development should be considered as part of a whole, as part of a whole precinct, and at present it is certainly running against orderly and proper planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Are there any other speakers on item 10? Yes, come forward, give us your name.
Hi, my name is Bay. I'm the proponent for the proposals for today. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm speaking against the recommendation for the officers, and specifically talking to the strategic context, the green space that's there, as well as traffic. My colleague, the architect, will be speaking on the building mass as well. Also available for question and answers after that. Just in terms of strategic context, I just want to put out there that we are open to conversation with the CDS, with WPC, in terms of scaling back the development. The premise for the area that's proposed has been bred from conversations with business owners, the church up the street along 15 McCabe Street, who has requested for a substantial amount of space, as well as community needs assessments done as part of our PSP. In terms of the land use activity as well, again, that's bred from that needs analysis. In terms of the green space, there's commentary within the report that suggested it is internalized. We've presented, again, a number of context and visual cues on how that is perceived to be quite open to the public. The biggest sort of draw card to the site is the supermarket. It's been requested by a quite majority of people who engage throughout the consultation process. And with that, the park is directly in front or visible from that supermarket, and encourage people to visit the site. In terms of the connectivity through the site, again, we've emulated what was presented by the City of Fremantle through their design report, that they are encouraging north-south connectivity from Buckingham Hill through to the Three Option site or the Bayberry site. And that encourages, again, an open, inviting sort of green space in the middle of the property. Lastly, on traffic, we've heard time and time again that traffic is a major concern for this property. We've looked at traffic in a big way as well, and when we considered the proposal, what hasn't been evident in the recommendation from the officers is that there is quite a big push for us to remove the reliance to traffic. Now, we're not seeking for increased density. I think the reality we're facing is that property has a set density and set expected population to go through. Now, we're proposing that we are encouraging people to live, work, and play within the property. And that means increase amenity, increase open space, increase commercial offering within the property to remove the reliance of actually getting onto the road and turning right at McCabe onto Sterling. I think that's a fundamental sort of solution that we can offer without impeding on more.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Lawver?
Sure.
Thanks for coming. I was just looking at when you mentioned like the public open space, and was just curious if you ever thought about putting the public open space on the edges versus inside of it, because it doesn't look very accessible to the public for me, and whether that was thoughts or conversations that have been had, and what led to especially the public open space number 2, which is basically just in between two skinny buildings. How is that public open space, I guess?
Sure, I think I'll answer both of them in two separate parts. In terms of larger format within the site itself, and we call it the Green Heart. Now, if you go through the PSP report, we've actually went through probably in the dozens of iterations in terms of design layout for the property, looking at connection from north-south. We've been through design review panels twice. We've consulted an independent assessor, independent architectural review of the plan. And time again, this design has been identified as the better design on the basis that we get natural light from the north, to put it towards the northern part of the property, and also encouraging that central community-driven outcome by having more people coming to it and feeding off onto the commercial units. So that's for that main bit. In terms of permeability and visibility of that location, to enter the site, we've allowed for an 18-meter wide sort of entry statement off McCabe Street. To say that it's not visible, I think it's probably lost in the scale of the drawings we presented, and even along from that Sterling Highway connection from north to south, along Sterling Highway, we've again terraced the property such that you can invite people walking from a north-south connection onto the property as well. As for that strip along between the townhouses, again, if you look at sort of the design outcomes that the architects worked through, and he'll probably speak to that as well in a bit more, it's been quite successful in Subiaco to encourage sort of like a community-driven sort of outcomes with houses and the community being able to have open space in front of the property. It is public to extend that it is accessible from public, but you're right, and that strip is more focused on getting more people out of the houses and meeting with their friends within a community setting.
Any further questions? Councillor Graham?
Yeah, well, just a comment. I think you're living in fantasy land if you think you're going to reduce traffic by this proposal. that will never ever happen. But my question to you is, why have you considered two 23-story towers when you could have considered, say, 7, 8, 9, or 10?
I think that's a very good question as well. I think the architect will speak more to it, but I think fundamentally the key consideration we're looking at here is that we're not seeking for additional density. The total density that for the site has been marked as 2, a plot ratio of 2. So that was the underlying sort of consideration when we did the design. Now, if we have a plot ratio of 2, an equivalent design at 7 to 8 stories will look like basically a Taskus on steroids. We're looking at narrow roads, no open space, limited public open space, limited green areas, and limited amenity that can be provided to that site. Now, is this an outcome that we want? Now, in the report, there have been two sections within the report prepared by the officers that have stated that Taskus is not an outcome that they want. In 2 separate reports, and I got the quote there, but effectively, this is not an outcome we want. So yes, the option of 7, 8 story can be done, but you're looking at low amenity building. Now, what we've done is that we look at the design from first principles, looked at what can be achieved by opening up the site to encourage people to live, work, and play in space, in the location. And that is offered by moving and stacking volume one on top of the other and opening up the site.
Any further questions? No, thank you. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Yep. Can you give us your name, please? Sorry, the gentleman over there. Sorry. We don't have your name on the paper, I don't think.
My name is Dennis from DK Architecture. We are responsible architects for the current PSP, and we'll be speaking against the recommendation today. But first, I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak, and I'd also like to first acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land which we meet today, and I would like to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. There was a lot of this item that was covered in a couple of the questions, but I would like to strengthen a couple of points that just to clarify that the current PSP is started as a redistribution of the massing, and the sole purpose of that is to improve the ground plane and also the safety around the area. As we all know, Stirling Highway is an incredibly dangerous environment. With the plot of land right on the corner of Stirling Highway and McCabe Street, it gives an opportunity for us to utilize this land as part of a thoroughfare to connect the ocean and the river. And the height distribution itself allows us to create this green pocket within the site itself. And really, it's to create a new corridor, a safer connection from the northern part of the site all the way down to the river as well. So I think that's probably a bit of clarification from the previous question. And there was a scheme that was prepared that is according to the current planning control, and the outcome of that is evident within the submission that we have made. And that really allows for really close proximity between buildings, almost zero green space within the site itself if we were to stick to 6 to 7 stories within the site. Instead, so we have essentially embarked to prepare this PSP based on a principle, again, mainly on the ground floor, and opportunity that can be presented to the wider community, and mainly to create a safer environment for the new and growing community around Fremantle. When a comparison was conducted between a PSP and a compliance scheme, the improvements was quite evident. As you could see, I wouldn't go through probably the full document itself, but there was mainly around traffic connectivity, deep soil areas, placemaking, diversity in housing, permeability, and visual corridors, and especially from Tasket itself. And if we were to build a building that is 6 to 7 stories, a large half of the building within Tasket would be fully blocked instead of having visual permeability to the ocean. So I know that this improvement can be afforded by considering a review on a singular dimension proposal, i.e. the height is the result of getting a more permeable site instead of a stock standard 6, 7 story without any sort of permeability for the public, and turning in result that will turn into an enclosed community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. Any further speakers? Mr. McGill.
Thank you, Chairman. This time, Jeremy Gill, North Fremantle Community. Actually, my first comment is the quality of the sound in the gallery, which is pretty awful. It seems to be directed towards you and not towards us. And it's a chronic problem there. I think if you did a poll of people at the back here and asked them how much of the presentations they'd actually heard, it would be a lot less than 100%. However, the last time I stood here was to address the JADA concerning the former Ford factory, 130 Stirling Highway. After hearing from all parties, JADA resolved to refuse the development application by 3 Oceans. This was an important result because it demonstrated the effectiveness of an officer's comprehensive analysis of the application against all relevant planning rules and policies, a strong and well-informed community, and a united council. If any of these had been lacking, the result might well have been different. Of course, that particular victory might turn out to be Pyrrhic as the appeal process, the ongoing appeal process unfolds. I mention this in the present context as we again have an officer's comprehensive analysis of the application, and I joined Tony Blackwell in saying that they should be commended for it, and a strong and well-informed community. If we have a united council backing both of these, we have an opportunity to again make an impact. So I'm here to urge you to support the recommendation to the WAPC that the structure plan be not accepted for Stirling Highway as the blueprint for the development of the site. The developer should be instructed to start again and produce a plan that respects all of the planning criteria, in contrast to what it does at the moment, which seems to respect none of them, and the community's aspirations for the future development in North Fremantle. A weakness here is that the council might well address is the situation where 2 major developments on opposite side of a road, which will be reliant on the same transport network, are being dealt with separately. For all in their inherent objectionable features, if we were to have them visited upon us, assessed as an entity, they might actually yield something of community value, or at least be less destructive of the values of North Fremantle. I have no other specific comment to make about the structure plan's inadequacies. Indeed, I would not know where to start. I will leave that to my better qualified colleague, Ken Adam, who will follow me shortly. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the committee? No, thank you. Any further speakers on this item? This will be the last chance. Ken Adam.
Ken Adam, I'm a North Fremantle resident. In fact, live just down the road from this development. I'm also a retired architect and a town planner and an urban design consultant. So I love this one, it's in my field. I agree with the officer's report and with all of its recommendations, with one vitally important exception. Reason for refusal 211, it is seriously misconceived and must be deleted. The central open space and at least the main vehicle and other access ways must be public and therefore vested in the City of Fremantle. The report, quite correctly, refers to the desirability, indeed the necessity, for the development to be permeable, legible and connected to the neighbouring locality. Proper integration with the surrounding community can only be achieved by direct connection to and extension of the public road, cycleway, pedestrian system. Otherwise, the development becomes effectively a private, gated estate, which is the antithesis of the community that we all seek. I never thought I'd be standing here tonight agreeing with the developer on this point, but I do most profoundly. Other points that the essence of what I'm talking about is illustrated in this diagram which I've prepared, and I will be leaving with you tonight 3 or 4 copies of my words so that you won't forget them between now and when you consider it. There are other points that I wish to make to guide the precinct structure plan which must eventually follow rejection of this one, are also shown on that plan. First, to achieve a decent landscape transition from the open space fronting the Buckland Hill estate, there should be a small adjacent triangle of open space at the northwest corner of lot 140. That's this corner here. In that way, you get a decent transition between the open space in front of Buckland Hill and this one, rather than an abrupt, sharp corner. Secondly, the idea of a landmark building to mark the entry to Fremantle from the north is an excellent one. Its proper location, of course, is at the northwest corner of lot 140, directly facing traffic approaching from the north, and not at the corner of McCabe Street, which faces southwest, where the idea that a landmark building as an introduction to Fremantle should be located on that corner comes from, God only knows. It doesn't come from sound urban design thinking. Thirdly, conservation of the modernist office building and the adjacent pine tree at the corner of McCabe Street will greatly enhance the development, providing a tangible link to the history and previous use of the site, as well as conserving an attractive and usable building with heritage significance. Fourthly, the McCabe Street Stirling Highway intersection will require 2 right turning lanes from McCabe Street into the highway and a dedicated left turning lane from the highway into McCabe Street. As my drawing shows, these can both be achieved by relatively simple adjustment of the main road's draft intersection design, without the need to affect the office building in any way, or the pine tree, or any compromise to traffic movement or traffic safety. Fifthly, the buildings adjoining the Central Park should have direct street level entries, which will enhance community connection and safety and surveillance of the park. I'm sure the developer, having heard him on the subject, would agree with that sentiment. As the drawing shows, these can both, sorry.
Could you draw to a close, please? We've got a big agenda and you're getting over 3 minutes.
A couple of more points to make very quickly. Some visitor parking could be accommodated, incidentally, on street side on the internal road system, which is most convenient for the public. But also having that Central Park in a public road will create very much enhanced community connection and safety and surveillance of the park area. The Richmond Park Estate in East Fremantle provides a model for this kind of development, albeit at a lower level of density. 6 point, I strongly agree with verge widths being wider than shown, sufficient to accommodate significant trees. 7th, there must be a legible direct pedestrian connection to the Buckland Hill open space from this development. I've indicated something on my drawing very diagrammatically. Finally, building height and form is critical to integration with the admittedly changing character of the locality. It should respect the character of the locality, which is changing, and the principle of respecting the natural topography. My earlier submission for 130 Stirling Highway proposed that height levels be contained within a plane from the top of Sisters to the height of the Ford Motor Company facade. This would suggest a maximum of 5 stories at the highway, rising to 7 at the east. An exception should be made for the landmark building, subject to its detailed design.
Sorry,
Finally,
you've gone well
creation
over
of
3 minutes, so could you finish, please?
Yes, I've only one short paragraph to go. Creation of public roads and open space automatically creates a very desirable subdivision of the site into smaller but still large sites. This will considerably assist staging of the development, and if different architects were employed on different sites, greatly enhance the architectural variety and character of the development. The latent development provides a good model for this, as do, for that matter, the streets of Barcelona, Paris, and other cities that we all admire. So I have two submissions to make. One of them is accept the officer's recommendation with the deletion of that reason to number 11. And secondly, please take into account the suggestions I've made in advising the proponent of desirable changes to the precinct structure plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just leave these?
If you could give them to the officers. Are there any other speakers on this item? Okay, so that's the end of the first lot of question time. We'll now go to the start of the agenda, and we'll go through the ones where there are still people present. So the first item is 29 Swanbourne Street. If you just pause for a minute if people want to leave. Okay, Philip Stechkel on Swanbourne Street. Thank you. This is a referred item, so it was a redesign at the request of the committee.
Thank you for having me. I just wanted to basically be here to answer any questions, but I had the opportunity to speak with Jenny Archibald during the week, and was made aware of a slight change that she was requesting. And so we went about looking at that today and have provided drawings of that change, which moves the upper floor further north. So to 1.5 metre setback to the southern boundary, which for its length now complies with the R codes for an elevation with windows to, actually I've forgotten the term, secondary windows. But yeah, so really just here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the architect? No. Okay, thank you. I'll just check with the officers. I mean, we wouldn't be able to approve those amended plans tonight, but the obvious thing to do would be to refer it to council. 2 weeks would be enough. Yeah. So the committee has the choice of approving the plans as they are, or referring them to council for 2 weeks. I also said to the southern neighbour that I would make sure everybody had read his submission. Can I just check that? He sent an email earlier in the week. We all read that. Thank you. Okay, so I will move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sullivan, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, I will get things going. Obviously, this is an application that was sent away. I certainly made quite a few comments about the sorts of opportunities to improve the design such that it didn't or it mitigated the level of impact on the adjoining property to the south. And I appreciate that the architects have done that to some degree. And I guess, in a sense, and I spoke to Councillor Archibald about this during the week, in a sense, the question for us always in these ones is we sent the applicant away for good reasons to try and mitigate as far as reasonably possible within the context of their development the impact on the adjoining development or the adjoining house. And that's always going to be a balancing act. Now, I know that they could have gone further, but I also know that they have significantly modified their proposal. And it basically, one of the things I said in the last meeting was, if they were able to bring it back so that it was roughly in line with the westward extent of the neighbouring property, that would be a big difference. I also said if they could increase the setback and or reduce the height of the upper story box, that would also obviously be significant. Things like not necessarily having a box style architecture, but actually having a pitched roof where the pitch is started at a fairly low height on the southern side also makes significant differences. So there are a kit bag of things that could have changed. But for me, the question now for tonight is, have they made sufficient change to satisfy the concern in the context of very difficult sites to develop? So for me, the answer to that question is, on balance, yes, that they have. And I would be happy to say, to seek the approval tonight. But I'll also be happy to hear out Councillor Archibald in her perspective.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Bear in mind, we'd need 5 votes to get delegated authority anyway, otherwise it goes to council anyway. So the option is to move a referral motion, if you want to do that, or just speak to this motion.
I could just, well, if I speak, can I then move it?
You can speak to this motion without referring it, yes.
And then can I come back and refer
yes.
it? So I can speak twice, yes, it's in committee. Thank you. I thought it'd be better to speak to it first because I do agree with Councillor Sullivan that the applicant has done an excellent job. I'm mindful of the terrible sound system. I better speak into the mic. I'm mindful that the architect has done an excellent job in responding to the council's and the planning committee's concerns, and the architect did phone me only a day or two ago, and we just had a conversation by phone, and I indicated to him that I thought what he had done was excellent. The only concern I had was that, theoretically, a 1.5 metre setback does give the neighbour just that little bit more, and they are very restricted in their open space, partly because of what they've developed on their own block. But that is as it is. They only have one small area of open space without buildings on it. So, so under the codes, the 1.5 metres is generally accepted as the setback. I think it's very important when you're dealing with boundaries on the southern sides of very narrow blocks. And I think that's the other point that I wanted to make. This is, I think it's very tricky designing on these blocks. There are 4 in a row, and the most northern one has this, very interesting, massive building in the back garden, and it's quite high. But I was informed that it was actually 1.5 metres from the boundary, so it complies. The second one is the one that we're dealing with tonight, and that is not 1.5 metre setback on the upper level, and the owners of 31 have said that this is the only issue that they have. They're happy to accept all the other changes, some of which will be positive, some which will be negative for them, but they understand that that's the nature of people doing their own thing on these very narrow blocks. And unfortunately, because the blocks are slightly angled, it makes it even trickier in terms of the overshadowing. So we chatted about those particular issues, and I certainly don't want to hold this up. I think it is worthy of approval one way or another. And but I was surprised when I got here that the architect had indeed had a look at whether it was possible to move it slightly further north. And it's only that, the small section on the top. As I said, they've done an excellent job in every other way. And he's submitted some drawings, which I haven't actually had a look at. I just handed them over. But I would be, suggesting that we do allow the process to have a look at these drawings and give their comment on whether they are in fact acceptable, given that they haven't had the opportunity to look at the details of them. And so to have it sent to council for a determination, I think would be the best way to go. But I certainly don't wish to hold this up for another month. I think it's that they've done a very good job so far. So,
thank you, Councillor Lawler.
Yeah, I also want to thank the architect and the folks that are building this house for the making really substantial changes and really acknowledging the challenges of the site, but also working with the neighbors. Um, if if it's a question about the process, if we defer to council, it would be 2 weeks. Would it still be what's before us in addition to what we haven't seen, or would it just be to consider what we haven't seen?
So the question is, can both alternatives be presented to council, or do we have to defer for the alternative?
I only ask because without having seen that, there may be unintended things that arise from it. And what's before us tonight, I'm comfortable with. But if they're taking another step, I don't want to prohibit that either. So
we could effectively add an additional comment to the report. So there's enough time provided we get a full set of plans, because I note the plans are just floor plans at this stage, but I suspect that wouldn't be too difficult to provide, and give you 2 effective dates of plans with an option as to which one council could approve. So yeah, it's possible.
Yep. Okay. So any further discussion on the approval? Councillor Archibald.
well, then on the basis of there being no further discussion, perhaps I'll move the alternate.
Well, it's a referral to council to
Referral
consider
to
the
council,
alternative
yes.
plans.
Yeah, refer it to council so that we can consider
Both sets of plans.
both sets of plans.
Is that all we need to have in the referral? Yep. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Lawler. Don't usually discuss referrals unless there's some pressing business, so we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. And that will be in 2 weeks' time. And thank you for your cooperation. It's been a fairly long job. Nathan Steele, you're here? Yes, Nathan Steele? Yeah, so we'll do item 7, Duo Road, if you'd like to speak.
So I'm just going to leave the chamber before Mr. Steele speaks.
Sorry, so Councillor Sullivan's declared an interest. Just allow him to leave the chamber first. So do you wish to speak or just hear the result? You want to speak? Yeah, you have 3 minutes. This is
Do you know the results already?
number 9 Duo Road.
So yeah, my name is Nathan Steele. I'm the architect of the project, and I just wanted to say that the project is really a result of trying to prioritise certain things above other things, which is things that we feel are very significant to Fremantle and to the development of housing in Perth, Australia, and the world, and that is the preservation of green assets, so the preservation of trees and the preservation of the heritage buildings, which is very significant to Fremantle. So as a consequence, we've sacrificed certain other aspects of the design, and that is really side setbacks and front setbacks. So in order to give over space to preserve a significant tree and allow access to a view of a heritage facade, which is sort of unusually located on the existing building, we have had to sort of compensate by taking space away from the front and side setbacks. So I just feel that we have prioritised things that are probably more important than a little bit of extra space on the side of the lot, and yeah, hopefully that's acceptable. The area of the house isn't significant. It's only about 170 square metres, so it's by no means greedy in its occupation of the site, and so really we didn't have anywhere else to go. And hopefully the fact that it's single story and the roof form is quite low on the edges also mitigates any of those effects. Yeah.
Any questions from the architect? Yep.
This might be for staff, but I'll ask you just in case you have the answer. On condition 2 about aligning the boundaries, so that way buildings are contained wholly on site, do you anticipate any issues with making sure that that happens?
No, we have already undertaken and engaged surveyors to action that realignment. So they're in the process of doing that, and I did submit a diagram of the proposed new boundary to the planners.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, which is for, thanks. Return the microphone off. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lawver. Any discussion? Councillor Lawver.
Just chatty tonight. I just want to say I really like this one. This is a great design, and really appreciate the time that you spent making the site and the building kind of work together. So I'm really, really happy this is before us. Thank you.
Any further discussion, Councillor Grant?
Oh, just a bit of a comment. I went to school, primary school, with the guy who lived in the house, and I was only speaking to another schoolmate the other day, and we just thought it was a big front yard property that he had all these years ago. I'm talking 50 years ago here, and lo and behold, it's another one of these properties that's actually a real lot. Would you believe? So there you go.
Unfortunately, built his veranda on the second lot. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. All those in favour? So that's the necessary 5 votes for approval tonight. So that's approved tonight. You can talk to the officers tomorrow. Thank you. Now, Councillor Sullivan back. While I'm doing that, I don't have anybody else left to speak. Is everybody just for the entertainment? Nobody's last chance? Okay, we'll just go through the agenda in order then. So the next item is Amherst Street, item 2. This is a JDAP refusal, which has gone to mediation, and these are alternative plans. There is an officer's recommendation, and then there is an alternative recommendation, which has been drafted by Councillor Sullivan. I will move the officer's recommendation. We can discuss both, and then if the officer's recommendation fails, we can move the alternative recommendation of Councillor Sullivan. So I'll move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Okay, seconded by Councillor Archibald. So we can discuss both. I'm happy with that. But so in discussing the approval, we can also discuss the refusal, and then we can move appropriately. So who would like to open the batting? I might open with a question, actually. I noticed in the DAC report, I was quite surprised to read the section that said that 70% of the houses received at least 2 hours of sunshine in midwinter. And does that mean that the other 30% don't get any or less than 2 hours? I mean, are you able to answer that? I should have given you notice, sorry, but
I suspect it's referring to that key midday, midwinter line in the sand that the R codes draw. In that worst case scenario, there is limitations to sunlight to some of those outdoor living areas.
if it's an individual house rather than a group of houses, can the applicant put in a design which denies themselves sunlight, and then we can approve it? We don't apply the amenity, so we don't require them to have sunlight if they don't want to have it. The fact that these are being designed by somebody else and then unsold kind of takes that control away, it would seem.
Under the current codes, they're fairly limited. It really looks at how you're impacting the neighbouring lot. As long as you don't have a roof cover over your entire lot, in fact, you could have a tall house that overshadows your own outdoor living area under the current code.
What it actually says is 70% of the houses receive at least 2 hours of sunlight between, I think, 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock on midwinter's day, which presumably means the other 30% receive less, which seems pretty. This is the townhouse bit, I think. So, just anybody like to comment? Councillor Lawver.
Just a couple of questions. And I sent through a few of these, mostly in response to what might be the other amendment that Councillor Sullivan put together. But I was just curious because normally we can't consider works on verges as part of a development application, but this one relies on parking on the verge, and that's one question. Two, there are trees on pretty much every lot in the drawings, but some of these lots, as noted, don't really get much sunlight. So I was just wondering, are there any tree species that we know of that can survive without sunlight? Um, and that may be just more of a rhetorical question. And the other thing was about the gated access. Just is that because there are gates on this development as well? And are there any other developments in Fremantle that have a gated access that's such as being proposed here? Thank you.
I'll start with the last one. You might have to remind me of the earlier questions because you rolled through them through you, Chair. In terms of the gated development, this development alone is quite unusual just with the scale of the number of dwellings being proposed at one time. So we don't have many development sites that have this many lots available being rolled out in one hit. Other sites of this kind of scale were sort of pure subdivisions or done stage by stage and were much smaller with public roads, whereas this developer is proposing common property. There are apartment buildings, though, that have gated access with car parks in them and common property, just not to this scale. In terms of tree species, I'd probably have to take that on notice. And I'm sure our landscape architects will work very closely with the developers in terms of making sure that if trees do go in, they are able to survive. The verge works, it is something that in a residential area, people are expected to maintain their verges under the city's policy. So because the applicant has come to us with a proposal to use the verge for car parking and for landscaping, there is that nexus there for us to be able to require they do it to our standard. They need to maintain that for an ongoing purpose anyway. With development sites further up the street, our parks team are currently working with the developer to make sure that the verge gardens that they've proposed and that have been sort of signed off through that DA are maintained in perpetuity by the strata. So a similar arrangement would happen here. So the design that's put forward will still go through a rigorous process with our parks team to ensure that it meets all our requirements and there's safe access for pedestrians and things. And then the strata would need to maintain that on an ongoing basis. So we wouldn't be able to impose it on them if they weren't proposing it, but because they are proposing it, we can review it and decide whether or not it satisfies our needs.
Any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Sometime before the first application was put in, Councillor Groom and I met with the applicants on site, and that was appreciated because it's always nice to get a bit of a sort of a heads up before people finalise their proposals and to seek some feedback from a range of different sources within community and within council and from officers and the like. And because both Councillor Groom and I can read a drawing pretty quickly, it was intriguing that we both had exactly the same responses immediately on site, which were pretty sure that doesn't feel like a very mixed use, diverse development. I'm pretty sure council's not going to respond well at all to having lots of crossovers and double garages, particularly on the main roads, on the public roads. It feels like it's not in tune with the intent of the structure plan. And at the very least, and this is what we said, at the very least, we would strongly recommend that you look at changing those things, changing or addressing those problems. Maybe consider at least one portion of the site being used for multiple dwellings, so that it would include some commercial on the ground floor, maybe on the corner or something like that. You know, maybe deal with Stack Street so that it has those elements that the rest of the street has. So there was just intuitive commentary to try and help the applicant understand that the proposal as they had at that stage just didn't cut it, and it still doesn't. And that's the problem. It really, I've listened to some really great comments and really read some really good input from the community, and I commend them for the amount of work that they've done in putting those commentaries together, because they really have nailed the proposal to the post and explain explicitly why it doesn't comply and why we shouldn't accept it and why it doesn't match the vision for the area. But perhaps I'm a little bit of a defeatist, having been doing this job for more than 20 years. Or perhaps I'm very keen to see development happen in that area. Or perhaps because I'm a little bit worried that JDAP, or perhaps through the SAT process, probably more specifically, that someone might go, oh, well, we need development, let's give it the tick of approval. Because of all of those possibilities, I still feel the need to be able to put in writing and put forward that, one, that we don't approve it, but two, that we give some heads up as to what would be the absolute bare minimum to make this development acceptable, at least from the outside skin point of view, or at least from the perspective of people having to visit the site, going into that development to visit people living there, or to do any other activity in there. Because the structure plan talks about the requirement to have people be able to access into developments. So what were those minimum changes? And that's what my alternative motion tries to do. It follows on, I guess, from where Sue Groom's alternative motion or additional points were made at the last time we looked at the first application. And it tries to expand on those. And if it comes to it, and I get to move that, it also tries to pick up a couple of salient points that the community have also made in the suggestions of some of the basic changes that would need to be made to get the skin, the outside skin at least, the public face of this development at least, vaguely in line with the very minimal requirements of the structure plan. So I put it to you that we need to refuse this. So we shouldn't support the officer's recommendation. I understand fully why they've made it, and I'm not having a crack at them at all for making that recommendation. But I think, based on my experience at JDAP, they will probably hold the line, and we shouldn't be afraid to do to let them know that we want to hold the line too.
Thanks. I just want to clarify for everybody's benefit what the SAT process is, because I personally haven't been this far down the SAT process before. And I would also point out the decision of JDAP was unanimous, which is not common. And the reasons given were quite strong, and the applicants have not made very big changes to the proposal. But it's a mediation, and I just want to clarify with the officers, if we refuse this and JDAP agrees with us and refuses it, does it then simply go back to the SAT member to make a decision? Is that as simple as that? They can approve the old plan or the new plan or any other plan? How does it work?
If JDAP reconsiders the proposal and opts to hold up the refusal, the applicant then has the option of continuing to pursue it through SAT. The next step would usually be a full hearing, which is usually a 2-day hearing in front of a SAT member who hasn't been part of the mediation, so they're a brand new member. They then look at evidence that both parties put forward in terms of the application. So the JDAP would put forward expert witness evidence from traffic from themselves as planners, and the applicant would do the same. The SAT member then compares the evidence, interrogates the evidence during a hearing. Each party gets to cross-examine each other effectively, and the SAT member then comes to a conclusion, either at the hearing or on the papers later on.
So the SAT member has full powers to approve the whole thing and add conditions, the same powers you would have as a, right, okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Sorry, I'll just clarify a bit further too. The SAT process, basically whether JDAP approves with conditions or refuses, it is open to the applicant of the appeal to continue the hearing to either have the refusal overturned into an approval or to have any of the conditions considered to be altered. So to give an example, if there was a condition that said you can't have gates, they would then be able to continue that appeal process and argue about the specific conditions that might be put into an approval. So that's worth noting, and it is as the officers have said, an appeal process can basically introduce additional alternative designs in the appeal process. So they're not locked into the designs that they currently have. So they could go back to the original, they could use the current ones, they could even put in modified version of the current ones or a completely different version in a SAT appeal process. So it's really quite open to the applicant to, I guess, change the course, change direction, and it's up to the SAT member to decide whether that's acceptable or not.
Okay, so just to clarify, if a completely different set of plans was put up, they would not come back to council for.
I think that would be within reason. If it was an entirely redesigned proposal, it would be start from go and try again.
Okay, any further? Councillor Graham, sorry.
Yeah, look, just some comments. Look, I'm six of one, six and half a dozen of the other on this one. I can understand why the officers are putting up an approval recommendation. I can understand why people aren't happy with it. It's not the greatest one, but just a couple of points. I mean, council wants redevelopment in this area. It wants to increase density over there, and this is doing it. If you were the applicant, you're thinking, well, you know, council's been banging on the door to make this a more dense area and a livable area, and this is just another part of it. So there's that. We know commercial doesn't work even in a city, so I don't think any commercial attachment to this development would work out there. If it did, well, that'd be the live apartments and the one just here should go talk to them to see how they do it, because you know, they've been trying to get commercial for years down at the live apartments and never will, I would suspect. So I mean, you've got to be careful what you wish for in this game. You know, it might not look a fantastic proposal, but it ticks the boxes for what council's trying to achieve in this area, and that's the redevelopment. So, you know, they're the things we've got to consider, and if JDAP and SAT consider it that way, well, it'll be fine by me, but I'll mostly go along and support what's coming up in a minute. But I think we've got to think about those things a bit more.
Councillor Lawver.
Yeah, I wish that we could consider our own personal taste when we're debating these things, because this isn't really one that I find personally very challenging to be appealing on any level. And I appreciate the officers' work that have gone into their recommendation, but unfortunately, I'm gonna have to disagree with them on this one. I, like Councillor Sullivan, understand how you got to where you're at, but on just some of the things. I mean, this would fit right in Ellenbrook. This would fit right in some of the fringe developments in the metro area that are going on right now, and it feels like this they're just kind of taking part of that and try to fit it into Fremantle. And amongst many of the concerns that I have about this, it really feels to me like even like with the public open space contribution that will be determined later, they're just going to cash out their requirement to contribute to the place that they're going to be building these houses with the public open space. You know, they're relying on other developments to deliver that, so the people that live in some of these very dark boxes can actually get out and enjoy some sunshine. You know, and the fact that we're also relying on public space again, the Verge, to provide 11 parking bays. So those kinds of things I think I find very challenging because it's not really, in my mind, contributing to that place other than building something there. I feel like that they could have done and they should have done a lot better. There's been no shortage of interaction with them and other councillors, and we're now in a SAP process. And um, I'll just add this other little bit. And it's not really. I'll just add it anyways. They put their units up for sale before it was even been approved. You know, it's like, to me, that's really. I think they've really decided that this is what they're going to do, and they don't want to listen to anybody at all. So I'm be supporting a refusal of this recommendation, and hopefully we can get to a place where development happens, but it's not just it's actually more suited for this area, in my opinion. So.
Sorry, it's just Councillor Lorver had his name down first. Um, sorry, I certainly do support Councillor Sullivan's alternate motion to refuse this application. I find it very disappointing that the applicants haven't responded to the hard work that community put in developing the policies and plans and that for the area that's there. And in addition, the other developments that have occurred in that area, and there is another one on the agenda for tonight in the area for the corner of Blinko and Montreal Street, where some, pretty innovative and excellent work has been done, which sets a standard for that whole area in getting, increased development, but getting, good, sustainable outcomes and setting a really excellent standard for the future of that whole area. So just also, I assume all my colleagues have read the submission that was made by the local architects who have been following this for some time, because they, as Councillor Sullivan mentioned, they did do an excellent job in responding to the new application that's come before us again. So I think in relation to, do we want more development? Yes, we do. Do we want that development? No, we don't. We've made it very clear what we're looking for in that area. And I think that I would really like to see these developers pause and come back and talk to the council and the community and get a really good outcome. And they can have the same number of dwellings, as Councillor Sullivan has said before, and get a much better outcome for the community without gates, without privatising it, and without totally compromising any of the open space. So I wholeheartedly support Councillor Sullivan's alternate motion, and I'm very grateful to my colleague Councillor Groom. We're both Eastwood councillors, just for a very short time yet, and she's done an excellent job working with Councillor Sullivan. So I fully support the alternate motion before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lang?
Yeah, just echoing Councillor Graham, I agree with one point that we certainly want density in this location, but we want it done right. And the frustrating thing about this has been through planning a number of times. Like within 200 metres of this site, there's some exceptional showcase examples of exactly what we want and what the community want. I would urge the developers, if they can, come back and have some constructive conversation with elected members, the community, the staff, and give the site and the suburb the opportunity to create something that what it deserves, and probably what the market is now asking for in White Gum Valley as well. Density done right in this location. So I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Okay, well, I will speak and I'll give Councillor Sullivan the opportunity to close the debate. I don't know if people realise there were almost 1,000 pages of agenda items tonight, and in plowing through them, I came across the waste management plan for this development. I don't know if anybody else came across that, but it was picked up by DAC as well. The developers actually employed a company to advise them on the waste management plan, and it's several pages long. And the plan is that each individual resident will put their bin on the verge, the council will empty the bin, and then the individual resident will take the bin back again. That's the waste management plan. What DAC calculated was that, noticed was A, there are no bin stores in most of the houses, so the bins just go inside the back gate and sit in the garden. And the furthest house has to go 150 metres to put the bin onto the street. So with two bins, I don't think you can take two bins at the same time. So imagine weather like yesterday, 150 metres, take the bin out, come back, take the next one out, 150 metres, then go back and get them back 150 metres both ways. There was no proposal to have the strata have the bins put out, which many stratas do. And then for bulk waste and green waste, they just identified a rectangle on the verge, which would be the place where they put it. And that to me underlines the absolute lack of care and consideration in this development. It's really, they seem to have got a plan and with the least amount of effort and the least amount of care keep trying to push it through. And I compare it with the next item, Blinko Street. They actually started off with the council's policy for the area, listed out all the council's guiding principles for the area, and then explained how they responded to it. It's kind of a model of how to respond to a council policy. For those that weren't at JDAP, these developers simply said, well, it's a policy for the area, but not everybody has to follow the policy because some people already are. That was their response. And so I'm very happy to support the alternative recommendation, and I'll just give Councillor Sullivan the opportunity to close this debate.
Thank you. I've seconded, so I might be closing, but I did just want to ask a question. I'm glad you raised the issue of waste management because it was something that had sort of jumped into my head, and I apologise to everyone, including community, for not having raised it last time. And that is that my kind of, I don't think I even got to the point of assessing waste management last time because there was no need in my head because the development, shouldn't be approved. But it seemed to me at the time that you could drive from one end to the other in that development, and it just seemed logical that the rubbish truck would drive in and pick up all the bins parked out the front of each of the horrendous double garage doors and would drive out the other end of the development. And so I just wanted to check, was that the waste management plan last time? And has it fundamentally now shifted to having, 110 rubbish bins out on the street every week?
Through you, Chair, Councillor Sullivan's correct. In the previous iteration before these changed plans, the waste management plan was for bins to be collected on site. So the city's truck would drive in through the site. People would simply put their bins in front of their dwelling or garage, whichever worked the best. It is something that has changed with the way the internal road layout has changed. There is less ability for trucks to get in and out, and so they've proposed the verge collection. Our waste team is happy with that. To be honest, they're probably more happy with that because it's a nice, simple collection on the street front. And given the width of the verges, there is room to mark out sections of the street for the bins to be placed.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, so, and just further on that, I mean, there's something that's been worrying me for some considerable years is that what we would like to see as a community in terms of not having ridiculous, 50-metre long rubbish bin scenarios where the bins sit out there for 2 days or even longer because of the style of development. It does worry me that our waste management team often go, yeah, that's actually best for us because it's easier to pick up. And I actually think that I would ask the director who's here to, really sit down and work with the planners as to whether or not that is actually an acceptable outcome in these more intensively developed areas. So I'll leave that for them to have a conversation and hopefully come back at some stage and really nut that one out. So I'll looking at both directors that need to be involved in that. But frankly, That, to me, that's another reason for refusal. And I just give the manager sort of notice that maybe in my recommendation that's about to come up, maybe that should be added because it's a fairly fundamental one. So if no one else is going to speak, I'll close the debate, or you close the debate, and then I'll move my alternative.
Okay, so we're ready to move to a vote. This is a vote on the recommendation for approval. So all those in favour? All those against? That's unanimous against. I'll ask Councillor to move his alternative recommendation, which is not the one printed out in the attachments. It's a slightly modified one, which you would have received by email today. I think the green bits are the difference, but Councillor Sullivan will explain that.
Thank
and
you.
You will move that. I'll second it.
Yeah, well, just before I move it, it might be useful to just clarify what I'm moving. So if you'll give me an opportunity to work with the staff to roll the scroll the page up a little bit to where the green and purple bits are, assuming you've got, yeah. So particularly in this recommendation, additional condition F, which was, so what you're seeing up there in black is what was in the additional documents. What you're seeing in green is some modifications that I was intending to make. And obviously the red is the bits that I was intending to take out. Now, additional condition F particularly related to the dwellings that they were thinking or proposing to be adaptable dwellings. So they're not necessarily adaptable. They're not necessarily commercial developments. So in response to Councillor Graham's concern that you have these developments where you force them to have standalone commercial units and they are hard to let. What these are dwellings which are adaptable in the sense that they can be used as a home office or a live-work situation, or alternatively, someone can actually run a business out of there, like a small coffee shop or an art gallery, and live above it and the like. So that's what is part of the structure planning process. So the question here is, in the additional conditions F, as to how to deliver that in a approval process, because these are conditions that might get added if JDAP was inclined to look at an approval. What I realised as I was writing these, and Councillor Archibald and I had a comment about this, is that you can't really write a condition that actually requires someone to substantially modify their proposal on the run. So if and the conditions that I had there were basically saying you need to go and modify units 1, 2, 3, 17, 18, 19, 20, 35, 43, and 44. And JDAP would probably go, yeah, we can't do that. We've been told that many times by the State Solicitor Office that you can't do that. So if we scroll up to where the purple bit is, so which is further down, what I did was just run past the manager whether a slightly less legally risky version would be to simply say that those units weren't approved and effectively invite the applicant, as we sometimes do here, to come back with individual planning applications that modified or basically modified them and set some sort of a direction for those. The manager has advised me, and I'll ask the question so that she can advise yourselves, were either of them acceptable, and if not, which one was the least offensive from a planning perspective? And it is the ones in purple. They basically do the same thing. The ones in purple basically say, we're not going to approve those units. Those units are unacceptable. The other units will get approved subject to all the other conditions. And the overall development gets approved subject to all the other conditions. But those ones, you're going to need to come back with substantially modified designs for those, which frankly is really easy to do because you can see from the wording of those recommendations that is actually quite easy to do. So I'll ask the manager that question so that you can hear the answer, and then I'll decide which version, green or purple, I'm going to go with.
Through Chair, Councillor Sullivan's pointed out that both conditions are potentially a bit problematic in terms of the reach that they do have. Both of them probably have pitfalls a little bit. This one in purple that simply excludes these units probably goes too far and effectively becomes a refusal anyway. But it does nice and neatly just block those units out, and it is very clear for anyone clearing conditions of approval that those dwellings on those lots don't have approval. So it's nice and black and white, nice and simple. The one that talks about amendments to designs of conditions, again, it is quite clear, but there is room for misinterpretation of how that works. So in terms of clearing conditions, this one is probably the neater of the two. And I think because committee in this instance is effectively saying we don't think this proposal should be supported, but we'd like to see some changes here if you do move that way. It might be that JDAP seeks some additional time to reconsider it, and the applicant goes away and does some work on these particular matters. If they go, we're not ready to refuse it, but we agree with committee. So either way, possibly problematic, but I'd probably agree with Councillor Sullivan and say this one is probably the neater of the two.
That's the purple. Okay.
So I guess the only other question before we move it will be, because this is effectively commentary in any case to JDAP, it's not a legally binding kind of decision in a sense. Perhaps ask the manager, should I just leave it as it is with both alternatives so that commentary goes to JDAP that way? Or so that's another option. It's really up to the decision maker, which is JDAP, as to whether or not they accept either or one of or none of these ideas.
I think that's a perfectly fine option. If it does get to prior to the JDAP meeting, if the presiding member goes, there might be some merit in either one of these, he may well put a Reg 13 request, which is a request for further information through to get a almost neater crafted condition, as it were, or a sort of full recommendation. But this way it sort of shows the thinking behind committee's position.
Okay, on that basis, I think I'll just move it as it is printed up on the screen with all of the elements in it, because it is self-explanatory as to why it's got different versions. So I'll move everything that's on the screen. We might need to go through it, from top to bottom. It's basically, as I said, as it was before. The only changes are either typographical. If you sort of scroll down, so a bit of typo there. And then if we keep going down to F, is all I have done is broken F into two conditions. The first condition deals with the skinny units along Amherst Street, and the second condition deals with the studio houses, the three sort of studio houses, two of which face Stack Street and one faces Amherst Street. And the reason I threw those in there is because the commentary that came from community actually talked about reversing the way one of those units worked to actually face it to the street, so the commercial opportunity faced the street. So I've tried to include that. And then, of course, the purple bit is virtually saying exactly the same thing, just in a different way.
So you're moving that?
Yep. And I don't think there were any other changes. Maybe just keep scrolling down. Yeah, so maybe if we... have you got it? Shall we do that as an amendment to the alternative? Yeah, we'll do that. So yeah, there's no other changes from the original, just to be clear.
Okay, so I'm happy to second that, and you're adding a condition on waste management?
We'll do it as an amendment.
Okay. Any discussion on the alternative recommendation? Councillor Lawver?
Yeah, just a Councillor Archibald and myself both picked up on additional footnote. It says, with regard to condition, and then 2 capital X's. This is the purple text. So I think we need to put something in there besides XX, because I don't, unless there is a condition XX. I don't know if there are that many in this one. I
just replace XX with above. Yeah, because the condition numbers don't really have numbers yet.
Oh, sorry, purple text.
We'll just leave you to work on that.
So where it says excess, just put in brackets above.
With regard to conditions above.
Yeah.
Okay. Take that as a minor typographical change. Any further discussion? I think we've discussed it quite well under the previous thing. You wishing to speak? No? Okay. Do you want to close debate, Councillor Sullivan? You have to go to vote.
I'll ask the officers to talk about it, some additional words for.
So we're just waiting to add the waste management.
I can speak, so we're not just sitting here waiting.
Yep.
I think Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Groom, thank you for putting the Herculean effort into these conditions and into really digging into not just the reasons why this is something that we don't support, but the reasons why we can give JDAP to not support it as well. I think that it's art as much as it is a science, and it really takes a lot of time and attention to detail, and just really think that you've done the community a really great service by doing that on this one. And I'm just really talking because we're waiting for the waste management words at this point. Oh, is that it? Okay, wonderful.
So I would move an amendment to my alternative, which is that those words become part of one, so they become 1G, which are the reasons for not supporting. So they become the very first part, they become part 1G. So
You're seconding that, Councillor Lawler? Yep. Councillor Archibald seconding. So that's moved and seconded as an amendment to the alternative recommendation. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. So we're now back to the alternative recommendation as amended. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. The next item is also a JDAP item in the same area. This is Blinko Street, item 3, recommended for approval. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lawler. Is there any need for any discussion?
what a relief.
I just made a comment that it's the way the whole application is framed simply takes our policy and follows it through to its logical conclusions using the same language that the policy uses rather than battling against it the whole way through. So I think it's a very commendable application. I'm happy to support it. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favour? And that's going to JDAP on the same day. Next Wednesday, I think, is it? Or is it the Wednesday after? Okay, so that's items 2 and 3. 4 is the variation to the sound regulation. I'll just explain this briefly. When the Leighton small bar was approved, there was a lot of objection from the residents above about noise from the doors opening to the alfresco area. The applicant agreed to keep the doors closed as much as possible, except when people are going in and out, and to limit the sound inside to 80 decibels at all times. He's now come back and said that having the door opening and closing all the time is difficult for the waiters, and they would like to keep the door open at all times but reduce the music to 70 decibels, and the doors would close at 10 o'clock when the alfresco area closes. So that's basically the gist of it. So it's an amendment to a condition. I'll move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Any discussion? You may have received an email from the applicant today asking us to vary it. It's rather late notice, saying could he still have 80 decibels after 10 o'clock when the doors are closed and the alfresco area is closed down, and I discussed that with the officer, and we thought it was just too complicated and too difficult at this stage, because when the alfresco area closes down, they still go in and out for a long time, moving things in and out, so the doors are still opening. And I'm happy to say we support this, and if they do this for a few months and there's no issues, they can perhaps come back and ask again for the 80 decibels after 11. So on that basis, I'll move to a vote if there's no further discussion. Okay, all those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. Right, number 5, sorry, Cliff Street, multiple dwellings. There is already an approved development on this site which has the same envelope. So the issues of built form and visibility from the street have kind of been dealt with, even if you don't like them. This is changing what goes on inside. So I'll move the officer's recommendation, which is for approval. Seconder, Councillor Lorber. Any discussion? There were some questions about the bins again from residents on Phillimore Street. Do the bins in the West End presumably get emptied early? Do they? I mean, they don't go in the middle of the day, presumably, do they? Early, yeah. Do we have any requirement in the West End that people move their bins indoors quickly? They can leave them out all week if they want. Because that's the issue. I mean, the convenient place for this development to put its bins is on Phillimore Street rather than Cliff Street, even though their address is Cliff Street. The people on Phillimore Street don't want all their bins in front of their offices. That wouldn't be a problem if they took their bins in as first thing in the morning, but I don't think there's much we can do. Because to go to Cliff Street, they'd have to go out the back, round the end of the street and back to the front of their building. So I just mentioned that.
Chair, I just wonder, given that this goes to become, looks like, short stay in a sense anyway, is there a possibility of a waste management plan that actually, if it's short stay or something like that, it's very unlikely that it's actually the people who are in the units that are going to put the bins out, and it would probably be someone who manages the short stay, in which case it'd be like a strata manager where they actually have someone come take the bins out, bring the bins back in. So is there something like that that could apply to this scale of development?
Through you, Chair, the committee could apply a condition for a waste management plan. I believe the applicants indicated how they would manage it anyway, so it would simply be a matter of formalising that, and it would be those kind of matters, whether it's the strata manager or if it does become short stay, the short stay manager.
So it would be possible now just to add a condition that says that a waste management plan to the satisfaction of the CEO. People are happy with that?
Move that way if the officers like.
Okay. If you could draft that, I'll second that. So we'll just discuss that amendment. Is everybody happy to vote on that? So all those in favour of adding the waste management plan? That's unanimous. Thank you. And the item as amended. All those in Councillor Lorber.
Just, we want more people living in the CBD and visiting the CBD, and this will take us a step closer to that. So it's great, wonderful.
Yeah, I mean the application is for residential, but obviously they can then apply to do a short stay in the residential building, so it could end up as either. Okay, all those in favour of the amended item? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 6, Queen Victoria Street, additions and alterations to existing building and change of use to office, shop and cafe restaurant, recommended for approval. I'll move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sullivan. I think the questions about parking are, and I remember the last time parking issue raised its head was 2 developments that didn't actually happen, as often happens. We had the hot bread shop moving its factory there, and they've now moved to O'Connor, and the Deus Ex Machina taking over the chapel as a shop and cafe bar, neither of which have happened. So the parking is as it was before either of those 2 were approved. I mean, I agree that we need to keep ongoing work as on the parking issues in North Fremantle, but I don't think that's grounds to refuse this particular application personally. Any discussion on this item?
Could I just ask through you, Mr. Chairman, the chap brought up about the vacant lot across the road. I mean, asking one of the officers, do we know if the officers have actually approached them again recently, subsequent to this sort of application, or is there a thought to go back to them? I don't know who owns it, but obviously they're not interested.
It has a permit, it has a lease or lease sign on it, but I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Perhaps the city should lease it.
He wanted very large amounts of money last time we talked to him. I'll ask the CEO to respond.
Through the chair, the city did approach the landowners over the road from the proposed development. At the time, they did seek some fairly tough requirements for advertising on the site and a fairly high price for leasing. The city also approached the car wash just to the north about whether it could be used for parking outside the operating hours of the car wash. That the owners, I think, were Sydney-based or Melbourne-based. That became a rather complicated conversation that ended up going nowhere as well.
So discussions will be ongoing. Okay, any further discussion? Although it's a large number of outlets, they're actually very tiny. I mean, 2 of them are windows onto a garden, and so they're called holes in the wall, and sharing an outdoor area. So we're happy to move. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So that's item 6. 7 we've done. 8 is the Walker Street pizza oven. I'll move the officer's recommendation. Just an interesting question. I'll get a seconder first. Then I have a question. Seconder, Councillor Lawther. Are there any regulations? Is there only the complete fire ban is the only regulation that affects an outdoor wood-fired barbecue or pizza oven? Is that the case? Whether it's in the front garden, the back garden, or anywhere else? So that we don't, smoke controls and things don't come into it, or nothing? Yeah. So interesting, because there are regulations about stoves, wood-fired stoves, and burning and smoking. But yeah, okay. So that's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Councillor Graham.
Yeah, look, I'm not overly happy with this one. They seem to be making a lot that this house has got Croatian heritage and all this. Yeah, okay, the family were Croatian, I mean, but there's nothing Croatian about the house. The house is just a 1960s or early 70s or perhaps late 50s design. It's just a 3x2. Tony Sermon, I don't think, would rate it as a great heritage house where he's lived all his life up until recently. And it's a bit of a stretch, I think, to say, look, you know, because it's a Croatian house, we'll have this trendy Croatian chimney out the front and, you know, this fireplace and cooking thing because it's Croatian. That's all I heard the guy talk about, was how Croatian it is. I mean, we're not talking a Weber kettle here. We're talking 4.7 metre chimney. Now that's what, I don't know the engineers here, but it's higher than that. That'd be less than 4.7 up to the first rim. So, and it's a residential street. For all this that it's out there, I mean, it's not in the sprawling Yallingup or Margaret River region, is it? This is, you know, still a residential street with people living directly across the road that are going to be impacted by this chimney and this barbecue. They've already been granted an upper viewing deck, so they've got something else on this house that's detracting from this so-called Croatian house. So now we've got a viewing deck. We're going to have a 4.7 chimney out the front. Now, some people might think it adds to it. Well, I'm not convinced. So it's in a residential area. It's far beyond the means of what I think any of us here, if it happened across the road from any of us here in our houses, we'd be a little bit miffed up about it. I don't think everyone would jump up and down and think this is a great idea. So anyway, they're my thoughts on it.
Any further discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, just quickly, look, I don't necessarily buy into the architect's description of and rationale. our job is to deal with the planning application and the planning merits. There are two aspects which are before us. Is one is effectively a front fence with a kind of quirky element in it, and I won't go too far into that. And the carport. In any other scenario, what we would look at is the carport kind of light and still enabling us to see through to the main part of the house, and there's exactly the same carport directly over the road, and there are a number of others in the street which have already been approved, which are not dissimilar. And in relation to the fence, the main criteria is that we have this interaction between the public realm and the semi-public, semi-private realm of the front yard. To me, that's the test. And some fences try to go to 6 foot to 1.8 metres to keep their vicious chihuahuas inside, and then plant vines over them and create a solid screen wall. This isn't doing that. This is a genuine effort to actually utilise the front yard, which to me meets passes the pub test of why do we want low fences and why do we want this sort of environment. It's because we want that level of interaction to the street. And I know that the neighbours that that were here that have a beautiful front veranda over the road regularly utilise their front veranda for social activities as well, and could have a barbecue on the front veranda for all I know. I don't really care. The point is, they're both very open-fronted, and they both allow for the things that we're trying to maintain in these residential streets. So I'm quite supportive.
Councillor Graham, you've got your light on. Any further discussion? Okay, I mean, the reason I asked the question, if the barbecue and the chimney was in the backyard, nobody would be interested. The fact it's in the front yard. It's not reason. So, all those in favour of the proposal? That's carried. Against? Councillor Graham. Thank you. Item 9 is the information report. I'll move the information report and the schedule of delegated authorities be received. Is there a seconder? Councillor Archibald. All those in favour? That's unanimous. And the final item is the One Steel 140 Stirling Highway Structure Plan. This is going to council, I'll just remind you. So if you wanted to make any changes, there is an opportunity to do that before it goes to council. I just would like to question that the point raised. Sorry, I'll move it first. Is there a seconder? Councillor Archibald. Just ask the officers, the comment made by Ken Adam about us not wanting the POS to be vested in the council. I think maybe there's a misunderstanding there. We obviously want it vested in us, but don't necessarily think it's the right place for it. Could you clarify your thinking on that?
Yeah, I'm just rereading that particular point 11. I don't believe the intent of that is for the city to be stepping back from its responsibility to maintain and manage POS. I think that's a very specific comment in the context of this assessment, which points to an unsatisfactory POS that we wouldn't want to be inheriting the maintenance of.
Is it worth?
Is that
is it worth redrafting that before council? Do you think, just to clarify it?
Yeah.
That you could do that as your own choice. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't need to move a resolution on that. Councillor Sullivan.
I was just going to say, or at least a footnote explanation about that clause. So.
It does read as though we don't want it, which I think we don't want there to be public open space, public roads. So maybe some clarification would help. Yeah, thanks. Lang.
I got this. There we go. Thanks. I think I mentioned this for the site over the road, the former Ford factory. It was brought up tonight. Someone mentioned that this site would look like Observation City, and then someone else mentioned we're going to have 2 lanes of traffic turning right, and from a distance it's going to look like Observation City. But then if you go into that public realm, so to speak, around Observation City, where there must be 8 or more lanes of traffic to get across West Coast Highway, we certainly wouldn't want that to be occurring in that location because of pedestrians going to the beach. And then reading through the attachments, there's oodles of traffic modelling and consultation with main roads. And the first thing I'm wondering is, would it be
I'd be curious to see what traffic modelling looked like if there was a train station at Leighton Beach, for example. And has there been any discussion with the PTA about reinstatement of the Leighton Beach train station, perhaps from the applicant or from our side? With this development and the development happening next door or that is proposed, I see this as a really good opportunity for us to have a conversation with the PTA about this. Rather than saying we've got to add in 5 or 6 more lanes of traffic, why aren't we having a discussion about adding in a train platform down below? That's arguably better for amenity and probably significantly cheaper as well. So this is just an opportunity for us, I think, to start that conversation with the PTA, whether us or the applicant. Yeah.
And we'll take that as a comment. Any further discussion? Bear in mind this is going to council. Mr. Lorva.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Lang, and I'm also similarly disappointed in both this structure plan and the proposed development just to the south of this one, that there was no connection to the beach from any of them. They both just kind of stop at the highway and hope people can scurry across. So maybe having a train station would help encourage some of that facilitation of actual pedestrian movement. I also just kind of wonder if the folks actually looked at what was done in 2009, because there was that in the report here, the structure plan the city proposed that was done that kind of lays out some really good public open space around the edges, some building heights that were recommended. It feels to me like sometimes, at least on these two sites, like people haven't maybe necessarily taken what the work that the community's done and council has done previously to heart, and actually looked at what people are trying to get out of these sites. So yeah, I think the officers did a great job in this report, and I'll be supporting it tonight, and be hopefully supporting it at council.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, and I know it's going to council, but these are really important issues, and they deserve our attention and our debate, and they're iterative processes, and it's worth making some comments now rather than just waiting for full council, which is always time challenged. The dream of having a development node around the McCabe Street area has been aspirational for this council for a very, very long time. And the difficulty has been a number of sort of things, two of which have been touched on by my colleagues, which is effectively points to the lack of sub-regional planning for the whole Leighton Peninsula. Now, we know that the future of Fremantle process is going to deal with, or might be going to deal with, some aspects of that. But there has also been sort of some ad hoc MRS rezoning proposals at the McCall Centre. There have been a number of different iterations of railway station relocations and road designs and the like, but absolutely nothing is resolved and nothing has been brought together. And what that does is it makes it really hard for developers on these individual sites to deliver the sorts of things that we want to see in the community. We don't want to see lots of 8-lane roads. We don't want to see anything more than 4-lane roads. So let that be clear to main roads. But we also don't want to see endless freeways develop between here and Geraldton to spread development out. And that's why we have this notion of a node of development in the McCabe Street area. And sometimes I wonder if our community forgets that and only points to the negatives that are in these proposals. So I want to say that there are some genuine positives in this proposal compared to the last structure plan. And they've been pointed out to us tonight. I actually do strongly believe that sometimes it is better to go up than out, that sometimes the gains that you make in terms of public realm and the flow of people through development and the opportunity to actually turn them from being gated communities to genuine areas of that integrate community and allow existing communities to move through them. So I want to just speak briefly to those. I could write, obviously, as you well know, I could write an encyclopedia about every one of these developments and still not exhaust my thoughts on them. So I tried to limit them to what were the absolutely key ones that were not allowing me to get much further than the officer's recommendation tonight. And the first one is to do with what Ken Adam talked about, the parkland to the north. Now, I and many other people in the community spent thousands of hours working with the state government to try and bring together this thing called the Fleming Parklands. It was meant to be a regional park. They weren't going to buy that, but they did produce the Fleming Parklands. And one of the key areas of that is immediately to the north. So that little, bit of grass that's at the entrance to Fleming Road, which is the Buckland Hill Road that comes off Stirling Highway, that obviously connects to the bushland immediately north, which then winds its way up to Buckland Hill, which also winds its way over the road, albeit not convincingly, to the area around the McCall Centre, down to the coast and the like. So 140 and 130 Stirling Highway have this really great opportunity to allow all of their residents to interconnect with that space. But it has to be done in a really meaningful and obvious way. And if it is done that way, then the POS that they develop in 130 will be a genuine part of that. It'll be yet another element in a connected parkland, green spaces that work all the way through North Fremantle and connect the ocean to the river. It's almost there, but it's not. And I would need to see that change as part of a structure plan to be convinced. It's quite easy to do. As Councillor Lorber said, there is 2 POSs in this development, POS 1 and POS 2. POS 2 is really part of a development proposal. POS 1 is a genuine effort to create a usable public open space. So I discount the views that are saying it's just private. It genuinely could be a great public open space, something that the council could be very proud of and the developers and the community could genuinely use. But it needs to have that flow of people from north to south. And that has to also occur on 130 Stirling Highway across the road, which we know that's what they were working towards. The next element, and I differ with Ken Adam, one of the speakers tonight on this, one of the things that we always have tried to do with all of the developments through here is to stagger development to respect the fact that we have immediately to our north in Mosman Park single residential. That's really challenging to go from single residential right into high density. And when I look at the proposal, Site 1 with a very tall building, Site 2 with I think 6 stories, and Site 8 it is, and Site 7, which is a very shallow development. Each of them, to me, has a problem with the way it will achieve that staggering. Site 1 doesn't do it at all. Site 2 does it a bit, but probably not anywhere near enough. And Site 7 probably needs to be a fraction deeper. Otherwise, the development's either going to have balconies facing north with 1.6 metre high screens all the way along them, or it's just simply not going to have the ability to be set back far enough like the ones to the east are. So that's a little change. Site 1 to me is not, certainly the northern part of it is not the place to put a very tall building. It needs to have sort of respectful separation from the single residential. It's not quite there yet for me. So that's half of my main points. A small one, but still important, the location of the secondary site entry onto McCabe Street, the very eastern end. That's either going to need to be left in, left out, or we're going to need to see a design to convince us that people doing right turns in and out of that laneway are going to be able to do them safely. I guess that's sort of a minor point, but it's a major point for most of the community because that's one of their big things. I do commend that we've finally been able to get the developers of both sites to end up with roads that align and a roundabout that will allow some sensible traffic management in that area. It would ideally be a bit further east. It's not likely. It's not really possible to do that because of the road reserves over the road. It doesn't seem to be possible to do that. So I think their proposal for that area is quite good. But I think they just need to look at the other one. And the last one I'll touch on, because I think this is really important, and I was intrigued to hear a little bit more about that from the developer tonight, is the activity centre aspect. And I think the officers have done some really good work in looking at that, and it's probably a lot more work. And I think what Councillor Lang was sort of saying as well, to me, there is the absolute potential, if not desirability, for McCabe Street node to be yet another activity node in the Perth network. That's what doing good infill should be aspiring to. But it has to be done in a way that is served well by the regional transport system. It can't be a transport orientated development that relies on bus services. It has to be something that is around a genuine node of transport activity, i.e. for me, a rail station, because that's the only version that we have. And it's not. It's too far from both stations. Now, there are proposals to link, to move Wellington Street to the south, not far enough, in my opinion, but it could be far enough that this development and 130 and all of the other developments up McCabe Street would be within walking distance of a relocated Wellington Street station. But that's not the proposal in front of us. It's not the developer's fault. It's the state government needs to bring that to the fore. It's also the case that we could see a new coastal node at South Cottesloe as part of that. Again, that's something that would be highly desirable, but it's not. It can't be done sort of in an isolated way. So the conclusion, I guess, and the other thing is there are a number of already local centres, I guess we would describe them, neighbourhood centres as the state would describe them, in Mosman Park. I'm not sure of the future of the one in Wellington Street. I can't imagine the Coles one further up is going anywhere or not. But just to get a feel for those, one of them has around about 3,000 square metres of floor space. The other one has around about 4,000 square metres of floor space of commercial activity, which includes, supermarkets, it includes bottle shops, it includes chemists, it includes hospitality, it includes offices. So when we start talking about the scale of commercial, I can't envisage centres much bigger than that being okay for this site, unless they're reciprocal kind of uses to normal commercial, if it's not an activity node, if it's not actually supported as an activity node by a rail station. So there is a part of this proposal which I absolutely want to see happening, but it's premature. And it's premature because the state planning, the sub-regional planning, needs to catch up with the desire of the development industry and the desire of our community to have genuinely well-supported, activated infill development. And so that's the message from me. It's not that this proposal is outrageous. It is premature, not because of the developers' lack of commitment. It's premature because the state needs to support infill development like this and come to the fore and talk about how we can actually achieve this in a way that the community can support. That's not about whether a building's 23 stories or, there are two of them which are 15. I have that debate separately and I'll lose every time because I think the 23-story building would probably be okay. And I'd be intrigued to find out from Ken Adam whether he thought a landmark building of some significant scale would have also been okay. As long as they're not fat and tall, as long as they're genuinely beautiful structures and slender, whether it's 14 stories or 11 stories or 23, ought not be the thing that either makes or breaks the development. It's all those other things that, to me, make or break the development. So I wanted to mention those. So next time I dare to step foot in North Fremantle, people know what my opinion is, because I am on JDAP, and they probably want to find that out early rather than later.
Any further discussion? I'll just make the comment that I think the distance between Mosman Park and Victoria Street is the shortest distance between two railway stations, about 24 seconds if you're on the train, and the distance from Victoria Park to North Fremantle is the longest space between stations on the Perth Fremantle line. And there is a website that gives you the distance between all stations. I did check that a couple of years ago when we were talking about similar issues. So I think we should be possibly bringing up that issue through either through the Future Fremantle Committee or as part of this discussion. Any further discussion? Councillor Graham?
Yeah, just quickly, I agree with Councillor Sullivan on most of his points and Councillor Lang. This obviously does, this whole stretch we're seeing does really call for some sort of government intervention to try and sort out traffic management, railways and other things. But just on this proposal, I mean, to me, this is actually going to be people wanting to live here because they want to live in Mosman Park. So we're going to get the benefit of all these rates at some point. You know, it'll pay for South Beach toilets, it'll pay for a cat bus. So we've got to be brave to support some of these sorts of things. And I was very interested, and I'm glad I asked the applicants the question about why they've gone 23 stories and blah, blah, blah. It sort of put in perspective to me a bit about, well, if we don't go 23 stories, we have a lot more of these nodes that are 7 or 8 stories, and that's going to, when I think about it, that's going to look worse. So, but it'd be a brave council. At the moment, I don't think this council is brave enough to say, let's support this structure plan. I think it's mostly a few years away. When it gets down to about 9 councillors, then perhaps there might be some fortitude to do it. But there are elements in here that I do support. The height issue is one of subjectivity, and we've had this with the Ford Motor Factory. You know, they've put up 21, and then people talk about should be 10, 12. So, I mean, whoever makes that final decision, I don't know. But I'm happy with elements in here. I'll support the officer's recommendation at this stage, but I don't think it should be thrown away. But there are a lot of things to consider, and it's going to need, I don't know about a WA development sort of plan mob it all, but you know, it's sort of heading that way, isn't it, for this whole area?
Any further discussion? Okay, let's move to a vote. Okay, so all those in favour of the approval of this report? That's unanimous, thank you. Just going to council. Item 11, motions with previous notice. There are non-urgent business, non-late items, non-confidential business, none. So close the meeting at 8:18. Thank you for your attendance.